We are joined now by Gary Dawson, who's from the Spinal Injury Association. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
They were celebrating in Salisbury, they're celebrating their 40th anniversary. You're celebrating, because I've just noticed your badge.
Yes, the Spinal Injuries Association celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. So 50 years of supporting people affected by spinal cord injury.
How has, and I don't necessarily mean in terms of medical treatment, I'm talking about attitudes to rehabilitation. How has that changed over 50 years? Because I just do wonder if once upon a time, once you had a spinal injury, you're out of society.
Yeah, things have changed a lot over the years. Even the 21 years since I broke my back. Back when I was injured, the predominant people who would access specialist rehabilitation all had traumatic injuries. And the good thing is that that almost anybody who sustains some form of spinal cord injury, whether it's through a traumatic means or an illness or disease, has the right now to be referred to a specialist rehabilitation centre. Now, not everybody's going to go. There's only around about 400 beds in the UK, and there's 4,400 people per year who will sustain a spinal cord injury. But it does mean that those who are able to access specialist rehabilitation have an opportunity for a much greater outcome. And
in terms of, like, rehabilitation, you were 19?
I was 19,
19.
Yes.
Do you mind saying what happened?
No. Well, just down the road from where we sat right now in Stretford, I was riding my motorbike. I was slowing down to a set of traffic lights, and in a freak accident, the back wheel locked up. I fell off the bike, continued down the road, hit the back of a car, and my own beloved bike followed me down the road and crushed me into the car.
Right. OK, so that's pretty traumatic. And I just wonder, when does the physical rehabilitation begin? Because I suppose there was that moment when you are told, I mean, where was it? C what?
I'm a T6.
T6.
Yes.
So that's...
So I'm completely paralysed from the chest down.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when I was...
So you're dealing with that, being told that, and then it's like, well, you're only 19.
Yeah.
You've got life ahead of you. Well,
that's it. I went from knowing everything about the world as a young, sort of arrogant 19-year-old, thinking that he believes his position in the world is final and, and knows everything, to a world of disability and medical jargon that I didn't understand. And I was laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, being told that I have a spinal cord injury. I didn't know what that meant, and I'm just laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, well, my legs aren't working. I've lost control of my bodily functions. The relationship I'm in is clearly going to end. I'm now going to become a patient to my family who are going to have to care for me for the rest of my life. There was no immediate knowledge or information, especially back in 2003. There's no TikTok or YouTube for me to turn to. Or more importantly, there was no Spinal Injuries Association support network coordinator who was going to come along and give me that information. So processing all this hardship was horrendous. But being a 19-year-old in the early 2000s, I also wanted to support my family through it. So I remained confident. I was smiling. I was going to be fine. I was going to be an athlete. I was going to walk again. All these different things that I was so focused on. But the reality was that I was facing a lifelong disability that was so complex. My focus was I was going to be a wheelchair user. And the reality that scared me more than anything was I was going to be doubly incontinent. I'd had sexual dysfunction. I'd lost all sensation from the chest down. I will need mobility equipment. And is society ready for that? Am I ready for that? It was a big thing to deal with.
I tell you what, Gary, I hope it comes across to people watching you. You've got amazing energy. You have a kind of aura around you of energy and can-do. You must get enormous satisfaction from affecting people who were as you were when you were 19, when it happened. You must see the change of how you can help, how things can be changed.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality of it, when I was injured, the services available were just not there. So as much as I had to come to terms with my injury, I then went on to Southport Spinal Injuries Unit, which was the most incredible experience. The specialist rehabilitation for me was incredible. Just being able to access the equipment, the specialisms from the therapists and the nurses and the doctors and the consultants. I was only there for 7 weeks because they taught me this amazing foundation of skills to then go and live my life in. What I wasn't ready for was the real world is not a specialist spinal injuries unit. It's not an accessible place. So when I went home to an inaccessible house, not being able to rely on adaptations because it's a very long wait to have your house adapted, had to wait for my own council property at the time. And the reality was that I was terrified, and depression sunk in quite quickly. So my coping mechanisms were very negative, very much self-harming. I took several overdoses. I used substances to cope with things, and nobody knew. None of my friends or family knew. They actually only found out about 3 years ago when it was published in an article in my local paper, and I got a very teary phone call from my mum. And the panic was that, why didn't you talk to us? Why didn't you tell us? And it was because they couldn't help. No one could understand. No psychologist at the time or a counsellor could have made a difference, because I needed someone like me, someone who had that experience, to sit there and go, actually, I've drove here, I go on holiday, I ski, I cycle, I'm in a relationship, I play sports. I'm back to being the person I am, albeit as a wheelchair user.
Is there access? Is there enough access available for people who have spinal cord injuries, or families who are trying to figure out how their babies or, young children are going to live in this world with a spinal cord injury?
The reality is no. It's a massively oversubscribed service. When someone sustains a spinal cord injury, it can happen in any way. I've had a 90-odd-year-old gentleman who was putting his socks on, fell a bit too far forward, hit his head on the wall, broke his neck and spent 3 days lay on the floor. And we also have people who have underlying conditions that can just, in the blink of an eye, your life changes. When this happens, you are then admitted into your local district general hospital who are not specialists. If you're lucky, you get over to the major trauma centres where you will access incredible immediate care, but then you're at the whim of the waiting list to a spinal injury centre, or local neuro rehab units that cover a wide variety of disabilities as opposed to specialising in one, so they may not focus on bowels or bladder. Then, unfortunately, there's many people who will then just get discharged home, may not even go to any rehabilitation at all. They may get referred to community therapy. This is where the third sector becomes crucial. Being able to access someone who can offer peer support. It's been talked about this morning already. The value of peer support is, you can't put a value on it, to be honest with you, because it's being able to relate and connect to someone who can give you an insight into what is possible. But that also extends to friends and families and employees, or the school of somebody who's young and has now access to, having to go back to education, but we can go in and talk to their fellow students, explain why they use a separate toilet for access, or they're no longer be sitting in the class because the school's not fully accessible. But then it is accessing those charities like the Spinal Injuries Association's services. They offer that lifelong support. So even if you're not ready in those first couple of years, it usually takes between 2 and 5 years to get your head around the spinal cord injury. When you are ready and when your circumstances continually change, you can access certain services.
You make a really important point about peer services, actually, because we were talking to Dale McKenzie a little earlier, and he was talking about veteran support. And you make the point, if you don't think someone doesn't understand what you're going through, it's very hard to be almost honest about your fears and, and possibilities, and believe it as well. You make... you're a great guest for having us here.
I'll be back anytime.
Oh, well, you are welcome whenever. Thank you so much, Gary Dawson from the Spinal Injury Association. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you both.